All right then, the bits of the country in between the major centres don't often get a lot of coverage in the media, but why? Is it that what happens there simply isn't of much interest to many people? Are the twin forces of time and distance deciding what's news and what's not? Media commentators Wayne Hope and Wendyl Nissen join me now. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
We often get complaints that people say, you know, in the deep south or, you know, somewhere in the heartland, they say, oh, you're always talking about Auckland, you're always talking about Wellington, you know, what about our areas? Why do you think it is?
I think, well, because the newsrooms are based in Auckland and to a lesser extent Wellington. I don't think it's the Deep South. I think it's Bay of Plenty. I think it's Hamilton. I think...
Where? What are you talking about?
Yes, exactly. My point. I think I travel a lot to the Bay of Plenty area and I pick up...
For caravanning reasons?
Yes, for various reasons, one of which might be caravanning. And I pick up local newspapers and read them, and there's always really interesting stories. And you think, well, why is that not being reported up in Auckland or on the TV news? And it's just, I think it's because of budget cuts. I think, you know, the more we've pulled money away...
the time and the distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reality here is television is not too good on this. Commercially driven television is an enemy of the regions. When we commercially restructured TVNZ in '89, the first thing to go was the regional news shows.
Because they had little newsrooms and all the little... Yeah.
When TV3 was set up, it was originally a regionally based enterprise. It didn't cut it. Commercially driven television requires corporate advertisers to generate the rating points, and they want urban audiences. They don't want regional audiences quite so much.
Well, what they want is big audiences.
That's right.
And sadly, in the smaller areas, there aren't big audiences.
Wayne makes a good point that the big fight over the TVNZ news ratings is in Auckland. They want Auckland 18 to, is it 39?
Absolutely right.
So they're not... you can't really blame them for saying, oh, let's send so-and-so down to Tauranga for the day to cover a story about, you know, Shrek the sheep.
But it isn't just a TV thing, though, is it? I mean, if you look at the radio networks, if you look at the big newspapers, there isn't a lot of coverage of what happens in the regions.
Commercially driven radio is not so bad, but it's still bad. You know, if you look at what happens when regional voices go off the air, when Murray Decker runs the whole country on sports talk and there's no sort of regional sports jocks on Saturdays anymore, that's definitely a development.
Although, can I say, Bruce Russell on Midnight to Dawn on ZB at 5:30 has a regional roundup, and he has all these people that get up.
They go around all of their little
him.
newsrooms and things like that.
Yeah,
don't
I think that's a
but
very good idea.
It is only the main centres, though.
It is, and also, isn't it interesting that every time someone gets a gun out and shoots their family, we're all very keen to race off down to...
But that's because it's a big story.
Actually, that's because it's a big story. That's a key issue. The Burrows case, the Wallace case. Yep. We all go down there. It's a great story, but what's the background to that story? You know, what's the Murray-Pakihau relationships like in those
although
towns?
you could easily argue what's the background
what's
to those
the unemployment rate? You know, what's going on? And all of us, it might as well be on planet Mars when those stories are reported, honestly.
Wayne has a very good point. In the old days, there was always someone in the regions that had been working the round, who knew the locals, who knew the cops, who could do the good backgrounders, and that just doesn't happen. You have this team of people deposit themselves in for 2 days and then leave.
But do you think we get those good backgrounders when those sort of stories happen in the major centres?
I don't think...
You do in the newspapers. For cases like that, you might get a really major feature in the Sunday Star Times or the Herald.
Eventually.
But less evident on television.
All right. But you've made an interesting point, though. You've said when something major like that happens, the big news organisations go there. So perhaps the answer is, very rarely does anything major happen in the regions.
No, perhaps the answer is there's no one in the regions reporting back to the major newsrooms about
perhaps
what's
the
happening.
answer is there's no one in the regions. Do you see what I mean? Because, I mean, you have literally the nature of a small region. I mean, people love to know what's happening in their own street.
Every journalist watching this show was brought up in newsrooms where there was, you rang Tony up north, or you rang Jean down in, you know, everyone, they all had reporters, and you were always, and you had to read every provincial newspaper every day and tear stories out. It's just not happening anymore.
Do you think there's hunger for those stories?
Important point here. The regions aren't totally invisible on television, commercial television, but they're seen through the lens of tourism or they're seen through the lens of heartland nostalgia. No real analysis of what's happening in those regions today.
Or sheep that grow lots of
I think that's a little unfair.
Fur.
I mean, if there's flooding, for instance, people will go there for a flooding story or something like that. But
yeah, but those stories
are
so formulaic. You know, the city journo goes down.
Yeah, well, flooding can quite often be formulaic, can't it? Oh, the water's come up again. How formulaic.
But the coverage is exactly the same, no matter how bad the flood. I mean, honestly.
Do people want more? Do people want more regional stories? Do you think?
Well, the Jaffa phenomenon tells you something, doesn't it? I mean, the resentment towards Auckland is partly a consequence of this. There's no question about it.
But I mean, I'm thinking, do people in regional New Zealand want to hear stories of other regions, or do they just want to hear their own stories?
I think they want to hear their own stories. I think they also want to be part of the news coverage. I mean, I think they want to see themselves. I mean, isn't the whole thing about New Zealand on air and about, you know, we're talking commercial television,
Yep.
but, you know, even in the
Zealand
documentaries and even in the funding, the dramas that we're funding, when all the dramas are set in Auckland now.
Yeah,
You don't even have a drama
It's either
set
West
in
Auckland or Ponsonby. I mean, we did have Pukimanu. That was a regional drama.
Well, all right. Do people
long ago
want
was
to
that
see?
way?
Do people want to really get stuck into a drama that's set in Dargaville?
Well, they've done very well in the past. I don't know.
Have they? But name
Yes,
me the
they have.
dramas about Dargaville that have done well in the past.
No, wasn't
No,
there was a
regional
good,
dramas.
There was a good drama show that was set in the far north. What was that one?
Mercy Peak.
Yeah.
Mercy Peak, that was regional.
Fantastic.
There's been some others that I can't
It was
think
in
of.
Warkworth.
Anyway, we've moved to Warkworth, but it was set in a regional
But
area.
the fact that the
Yeah.
major two dramas on at the moment, or about to be on, West Auckland, Ponsonby, that tells you volumes about what the advertisers are after.
And that's true, because, I mean, there's the commercial imperative. All right, is it going to get better or worse?
Worse, because, I mean, we're looking at more budget cuts in the TVNZ news department. I mean, that just says to me, well, you know, there's going to be less people down country
Yeah, all
reporting.
right, but I
And
mean,
yet
is
there's
this led by TVNZ? I mean, if
No,
there are
no,
budget
no.
cuts there, will
commer-
the window open?
It's
and other
commercial.
people-
It's commercial television generally. Let's not bag TVNZ by itself. I mean, TV3's track
No, I'm
record
with
of
him on
regional
that.
coverage is non-existent, pretty much.
Yeah.
All
you
right,
know
then.
what? Someone could actually start up a regional news service and sell it to the commercial network.
Now, there's a very good potential
good
here.
idea.
With the Freeview initiative, digital television, there's plenty of technological space to do this, as long as it's, you know, it's got to be more content-driven. But
Have you just thought of that, Wendyl?
Yeah, just that minute, live on
you could
television.
run it from your caravan in Taranaki or wherever it is.
Well, why not have a low-cost regional news on the new Freeview channels?
Why not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's a brilliant idea, Wayne. I'm glad
All
you
right.
came up with that.
Let's have a look inside Wendell's caravan. All right, Wayne Hope and Wendyl Nissen, thank you very much for joining us.